Welcome to Studio Theatrica and the video series The New Normal, Swedes on Corona and the Silver Lining. My name is Ottiliana and I'm broadcasting to you from Umeå in northern Sweden. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with a dear friend of mine. Dr. Adrienne MacIain is the author of Melting Ivory, and a professional storytelling coach who delights in using her PhD in drama to help people spin the mucky straw of life experience into narrative gold. She's the creator and the host of the That's Aloud podcast, where she uses her unique story discernment process to help folks tell the stories that they are not telling. Her motto is live aligned and live aloud. Please help me welcome Adrienne. So Adrienne, it's so wonderful to see you.
It is wonderful to see you too. You look beautiful as always.
Same. So just for the record for the viewers, we have known each other for quite a long time now. We studied at UC Santa Barbara and got our PhDs there in theater studies.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
been about a decade, a little more, 15 years, I think.
Years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you moved back home to Seattle, and and we lost contact with each other. But then a few years ago, we reconnected via Facebook, and then you just had gotten married.
Yeah.
And you're planning to do your honeymoon in Ireland, where you both have backgrounds from.
Yeah.
But then you completely changed your minds, and then you spent your honeymoon in our country place here in Västerbotten, in Bygdeträsk.
Yes. So my husband, David, absolutely loves Sweden. He's been obsessed with Sweden for a very long time. So when he found out that I actually knew someone from Sweden, he got super excited and wanted to see pictures. And I showed him the pictures. And do you remember what he said when he saw the pictures?
Yes.
He said, "Are you absolutely certain that this place exists outside of my imagination?"
And then I had said that if you guys ever want to come and visit, you're welcome anytime. And he was like, what did he write? That, when can we go?
Yeah. When can we leave?
When can we leave?
So, I mean, the honeymoon was just absolutely magical. It was so perfect. So perfect. And we are working now toward the goal of moving to Sweden.
Yeah.
That is our ultimate goal.
Yay! And then you came back within a year, not even a year, you came back a second time to visit.
That's right. Yeah.
Looking
and
for places and areas.
We would have come for a third time, except for coronavirus.
Yes, which is the topic of today. What a nice
Exactly. You're welcome.
But before we go into the 8 questions, is there anything that you could tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am what I call the story whisperer, and I made up this title for myself because I couldn't come up with a better title than that. But basically what I do is I help people find their core stories and tell them. And I think a lot of the time we have stories kind of locked up inside of ourselves that we're not even aware of, that color everything that we do and everything that we think and see about the world. And so when you can get that story outside of yourself, not only is it no longer kind of gumming up the works on the inside, then it's out there as a kind of beacon of hope and inspiration for other people who might be going through the same thing that you've gone through. And so what I do, I have a podcast called That's Aloud, ALOUD. And on this podcast, I help people do this exact thing. I talk them through finding a story and telling a story. And I do this professionally. And so you can find out more about my work at www.thatsaloud.com.
You just published a book that you've written.
I did.
It's a biography.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a memoir about my time in West Africa. I actually spent a year in West Africa back in 1999. And it was a very exciting time, a very dangerous time. It turns out I went to what was at the time the most stable country in the region, but there was a coup d'etat while I was there,
Mm.
and the power toppled. And I ended up getting shot at and having to escape the country. But the relationship that developed out of that through the trauma bonding of that turned out to be far more dangerous than anything I had experienced heretofore. And so the bulk of the book is actually about that relationship and recognizing the pattern of abuse that was so subtle and so difficult to kind of parse, because it wasn't physical abuse, it was emotional abuse for the most part, until the end, when it escalated and I had to escape to save my own life. And so I wrote the book mostly because I just wanted to help other people, because I know right now, because of COVID, there are a lot of people who are stuck with their captors. And I say captors, their abusers are usually family members or spouses or someone that supposedly is supposed to love them and take care of them. And so it can be a very confusing and scary thing, especially when you are isolated. And right now, we're all a little bit isolated. But those people in particular are feeling very, I think, alone and abandoned. And so I really wanted to get this book out there right now. Even though it happened 20 years ago, I finally got inspired to finish the book and get it out there. And right now, I'm working on a second book, a sort of companion piece, which is a guidebook, kind of a practical workbook for recognizing those abusive patterns and getting out of those relationships and healing from them.
Beautiful. I would love, when I'm done with this Corona series of interviews, I would love to do another talk with you, both to delve into It's Aloud and the work that you do in the podcast, and then also with the book or the two books, and the depth of all of that, and the great work that you're doing around that. It would be just wonderful, and I think many people would be very interested, but also benefit from it, of course.
Yeah. And also, since I know you and I have theater degrees, I will say I also published my dissertation as a book. I did. Playing on the Edge. So that's out there as well for those who are interested in youth culture and the carnivalesque in the United States.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And it might also not only educate people, but also cheer them up in dire times. Like
yes. It's actually a very, especially for an academic piece, it's very cheerful.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember so well when you were working on that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really great. Perfect.
Yes.
Good. So let's dive into the questions.
Absolutely.
And the first one then is, how has the current coronavirus crisis changed the way you live? And are there any positive changes you plan to integrate into your life more permanently?
So I am one of the very blessed and lucky people out there who already worked from home. Being a writer and a podcaster means that all of my work can be done from pretty much anywhere. Obviously, I need my microphone for the podcasting. But other than that, I just need a laptop. And so the beautiful thing about this has been that there's been very little interruption to my work life. However, it was a huge interruption to my social life and my family life, because I have two little girls who I share with their father and stepmother, and we're all good friends and we live pretty close to each other. But because of we live in Seattle, and Seattle was one of the first places to get hit in the United States with COVID. In fact, I think it was the first place. It was kind of ground zero for COVID in the United States. And so Governor Jay Inslee, bless that man, I think he's handling this beautifully, by the way, put a full lockdown on us very early on, which I think was absolutely the right thing to do. But that meant that because my kids happened to be at their dad's place at that time, I didn't get to see them for 2 months, which was
so
really
painful,
really hard. So we did a lot of, like you do, Skyping and a lot of kind of electronic socializing, but it's not the same. You don't get to snuggle them. You don't get to, smell them. I know that
Yeah.
sounds dumb, but those things really start to get to you, and it's really hard, especially when it feels dangerous and you feel like you can't protect your kids, you know? And so that was a really hard time for me. On Mother's Day, we kind of lifted the ban and allowed them to come over, and they came for, I think, a week at that time. And they've been back a couple of times since, but now the numbers are starting to climb again. And so we're kind of discussing what are we going to do now? And it's tough. These decisions are not easy.
Yeah.
So
And
in terms of the positive things that I plan to keep, I've been going out for long walks pretty much every day because that is the only entertainment that I have. Netflix can only take you so far. I really need like outside contact, and I love nature. And so I've been going for these long hikes. Again, super blessed. I live in this beautiful area where there's lots of hiking trails. And I live on a mountain called Squawk Mountain, which is not a very popular hiking spot because it, there's beautiful woods, but there's no like big vista. You don't get to like the peak and then you can see, the beautiful view. And so it's not as popular as some of the other hiking destinations in the area, which means that, especially if you go to the kind of lesser known trails, which I know them all because I grew up here, you can hike all day and not see another person.
ah,
Yeah. So that's been just an absolute godsend for
yeah.
me. So I think that's the thing that I'm going to incorporate into my life is just remembering how important nature is to me and getting out into nature every day, just at least for a little while. Even if it's raining, just get out there, you know, grab your hat, whatever you're going to do, and just get outside for a little while.
That is so healthy. And both
Yeah,
physically, but also mentally, spiritually, emotionally, like on all levels. That's so
absolutely.
great that you have been able to do that for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you feel fear, safe, and or hopeful? If so, how?
So it's kind of all over the place, to be honest with you. There are days when I suddenly just feel terror, you know? My mom, I love my mom, but she has this weird insistence on watching the news all the time.
Hmm.
And I think it's maybe a generational thing. Her generation just like watched the news every day. And it's so hard for me to process all of that kind of negative information all at once. And so whenever she turns the news on, I just get a little bit like overwhelmed and freaked out, and I kind of have to like leave the room.
Hmm.
And it's not that I want to remain ignorant. I do, inform myself and look up what's going on, but it's the delivery. It's that sort of doom and gloom, like, I think because they want their ratings to go up, they have to kind of portray things as like so dire and so extreme. And so it's a little bit hard for me. So there are days like that where I just feel sort of like grieving and overwhelmed. And then there are days when, like I said, I go for a long walk and it's like I could do this indefinitely. Like I'm okay and the people I know are safe. We live in a pretty well protected area, all things considered. When the protests were happening in Seattle, and by the way, I am a very big Black Lives Matter supporter, and so I am firmly on the side of the protesters and all of this. But there was some violence that happened, mostly from white supremacists who came and tried to kind of stir up trouble, and also from the police, really coming in with riot gear and sort of causing tensions to rise.
Hmm.
And so because of that violence, I did get really worried about my kids for a while. But it's been really nice to be on this mountain, kind of away from all of that. And it does give me this kind of sense of, I would say almost a false sense of security, because honestly, if things really go sideways, like we're not going to be that protected here, to be honest. And also, the thing that worries me most, I think, is that the chain of supply has been interrupted. We saw this. So my husband has a business, had a business building fences, and was unable to get the wood. The supply chain was interrupted and he just couldn't get the wood anymore. And so his business went under. And I worry about that in terms of our food supply. We do not have a garden here because we live in a forest. You know, it's way too shady. There's no sun exposure in our yard for us to grow our own food. And so I really worry about that. Like, what happens if we're not able to get food anymore? So that's the thing that kind of scares me the most. But I will say I have felt very hopeful just in the way that the community has responded to this and how they've kind of banded together, even though they can't physically be together. And for example, for a while, there was a little, you know, they have sort of little free libraries sometimes. It's like a little box where people just leave a book and can take a book. People were using those to put supplies out, like food and toilet paper and things like this, just for anyone who needed it. And so that kind of community spirit really brings me hope that something good could come out of this.
That moves me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you miss most from before this pandemic, and what do you think is needed to make that feel safe to enjoy again?
Oh, gosh. Honestly, just people watching, like going down to, you know, a restaurant or a cafe or some kind of public place and just being around other people, just to be around them and watch them and listen to their conversations and, you know, like experience other people's lives. I'm a very social person, always have been. I'm that person who, you know, sits on the bus and then strikes up a conversation with a total stranger. I think as a writer, you kind of have to be that person too, because you have to empathize and put yourself into other people's shoes and understand how other people think, you know, to be able to write about people. Memoir, of course, is, you know, from my own perspective, which makes it a lot easier in that way. But it also, you have to kind of flesh out the other characters. And so I think you just have to be interested in people if you want to be a storyteller. And so it's been really hard to have that automatic, no, don't, you know, go away from that person, not toward them. Don't strike up a conversation, leave them alone. You know, I wave at people. I have a little mask, by the way, where I drew a little animal face on it because I just got so tired of people not like smiling at me. And I get compliments on it all the time, but it's like from, you know, 6 feet away, like, hey, great mask. Thank you. So I think that's the thing that's the hardest for me, is just not being able to socialize normally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And meet new people. You know, it's really hard to meet new people right now. And I like meeting people. So networking, and yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. And when what will be needed for you to feel safe again in approaching that?
Honestly, I think there has to be a vaccine. There has to be some kind of, you know, way for us to handle this on a large scale, for me to feel comfortable just going up and talking to strangers again. It's going to be a while because, especially, I should mention, my mother is a caretaker for a living. Now, first of all, she's in her 70s. So she's kind of the prime, you know, I guess, target of this plague. And also, she works with people who have immune deficiencies, who are already sick and could die if they got corona. And so I feel this great responsibility to stay healthy myself so that I don't spread this to people who are more vulnerable than I am. And also, it just sounds awful. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
What will the new normal look like, and how do you intend to contribute to that?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I think the new normal is going to be a lot less commuting. I think people are really going to realize that electronic ways of doing things are now viable, and that they can work from home a lot of the time, and they don't have to go to an actual office building to get things accomplished. Now, I do think that people will appreciate the time they have with other people more now. And so there will be, more kind of gatherings and collaborations and things like that in person once all of this, kind of the smoke clears. That said, I do think that people are going to realize, oh, I don't have to do things exactly the way I've always done them. That you can find new ways to, create a work-life balance that works really well for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 5. Now you have been in Sweden, but you're of course not here now, but you have, like some
Don't remind me.
some insight to our culture and how it
Absolutely.
works here. So I'm very curious to know what you think about Sweden's approach of handling the crisis.
Well, I think Sweden is a very unusual country. And I think that you all were perfectly poised to try something different because social distancing is sort of built into your culture already. And so it made sense to sort of do this experiment in, herd immunity, figuring out, can there be a compromise? Can we live a fairly normal life and still, stay safe? And so it's been a really useful thing, I think, to see how the ways that has worked and not worked, and learn from that. The United States obviously has been a complete failure in the way we've handled things as a whole. And so I think it would be ridiculous of anyone to, I guess, cast stones. But I do think we can look at places like New Zealand as a really good example of a place where they did a great job of, containing the spread very quickly. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how things play out long term.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting it will be. And of course,
Yeah.
everyone will take stock, analyze, look back also. Like in Sweden now, they have created I don't know what you call it, but sort of like a task force from the government that already now is starting to analyze the different steps and so on, so that there will be a very thorough following up when all of this is over, so that we can be more prepared in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's
what happens.
Super important. And the other thing that's important, I think, is to look at how this has impacted the environment because of, so few cars on the road and things like that. I'd really like to see how that has affected the numbers in terms of global warming and things like that. Has there been any change or not? And that could give us a really good sense of the scale of what needs to change or what needs to be done to really affect those numbers.
Yeah. And then number 6, how do you use technology to get around the situation? And are there any keepers for the future?
Yeah. So gosh, Aria and I, that's my daughter, have used just about everything. But we use a lot of Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp calls, and there's so many video chat options available now. It's kind of overwhelming, actually, and that's really wonderful. You can do it on your phone, you can do it from your laptop, and so just recognizing how easy it is now to have those kind of FaceTime moments with your loved ones, and how kind of ridiculous it is that we don't make use of that technology as often as we could or should. And so that's definitely a keeper to me. I've been calling my dad, who also is getting up there in years and has been having health problems for the last few years. And so I've been, calling him once a week and doing a little just FaceTime with him. And that's been really, really good. So I think, again, those are the things I'm going to keep, is just recognizing that even though I could see someone in person, I probably won't necessarily on, a regular basis, because we all get busy, we all have lives. And so just having that regular rhythm of getting in touch with someone, seeing them face to face, hearing their voice, reconnecting with them, I think is really important.
Yeah, beautiful. Do you see people and groups using the current crisis as an opportunity to create new or better systems in some kind of way? If so, how?
Yeah, I mean, I think when when a group of people took over an entire neighborhood in Seattle, that was pretty exciting.
Mm.
Just recognizing that there there are so many different ways to organize a system or create a life for yourself. And we get in this little rut of what is likely or probable or feels practical. And this whole crisis has really turned everything upside down and said, we don't know what's probable. We don't know anything. And helped us to recognize that truly we don't know as much as we think we know about how things are going to go or what the future looks like or any of that. And so it's opened up possibilities that we had not really given much thought before. And I see people now doing things like putting gardens into their yards and organizing into groups and saying, hey, if we're not able to get food, what will we do as a community? How will we solve this problem? And I see a lot of that just really grassroots community organizing going on. And I really think that's the future. I think what's going to happen more and more is that people are going to just by, small community by small community, create systems that work for them and worry less about what the politicians are doing and more about, well, how are we going to support each other? How are we going to create a system that works for us? And not being so isolated in these little bubbles of like, well, this is my family and that's your family. And, I'm going to keep what's mine and you're going to keep what's yours. Because I think people are starting to see that that doesn't work long term. You can do that for a while, but then eventually you need a community. You need help. You can't just, be an island.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then the last but not least question, is there a silver lining in this crisis in your own personal life and globally?
So the one thing I've seen more and more is that people are really opening up to their own creativity. That this is a time when, because they were not able to do the job that, they've been paid to do for a long time, they were able to have a moment to just be instead of doing all the time and have this opportunity to think, well, what do I really want to create? And so I've seen people starting to create in ways that they haven't done in a really long time. And that is really exciting to me, to see people really get in touch with what are my gifts? What do I really love to do? And what do I want to create? And actually putting some effort into doing that. And that has been just absolutely beautiful. So I would call that the silver lining.
Wonderful. And that's a perfect segue once again into the closing, uh, because in your podcast that you do,
Mm-hmm.
that is one thing that you do, like it's like people's creativity and what wants to come out of them and listening into,
Yes.
learning to listen to ourselves and you helping in that process.
Absolutely. That is more or less what I do, is I just help people get aligned to themselves. And I know that sounds really silly, but it's amazing how misaligned we all get through life.
Mm.
We think, oh, well, we have to, be responsible for other people and we have to, be a good citizen and we have to follow these rules and we have to do these things. And it gets you further and further away from your authentic joy of what really brings you joy. And so, what I do is I help people find their joy and find their story and just authentically share it with the world. So, if you have a story that you're not telling, or if you have a feeling like you're just not quite aligned to your core story, I would love to talk to you. So, just ping me. You can find me again. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called That's Aloud Living Out Loud. I'd love for you to join that group. It's a kind of collaborative effort in live journaling where we kind of share our stories together and explore ideas together. And I also, I would just love to invite anyone who's listening to this right now who feels like, I don't know where to start. You know, sure, I'd love to tell my stories, but I don't even know where to start. Just write to me and we'll have a conversation and just see what happens.
And everyone listening and watching this, you can obviously tell how wonderful Adrienne is, and her warmth, her wisdom, her brilliance, and joy of life. And also your care for other human beings.
Yeah. It can be a little overwhelming right now. I think, all the empaths out there right now are really having a hard time because there's just so much difficult energy floating around to process. And so I really want to encourage everyone to have so much self-compassion right now. If you're not being as productive as you think you should be, as if you're not being able, if you're having a hard time focusing like you normally do, please just forgive yourself, give yourself a big hug, pat yourself on the head, whatever you need to do, and just say, it's okay. I'm processing a lot of grief right now. Because even if it's not your grief, you are processing a lot of grief right now because it is all around you. It's a very hard time to be sensitive, but it's also a beautiful time to be sensitive and to be creative and to be able to take that energy and make something beautiful with it.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. You are so
Absolutely.
beautiful and so wonderful.
I love you.
I love you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to me and Adrienne today. And let's see each other in the next episode. Also, I definitely will bring Adrienne back for another talk where we delve into all these beautiful, important areas of life. Thank you. Next up is Adrienne's husband, David Woodward. David is on a mission to teach people how to create and implement holistic systems in every facet of their lives. He believes that the freedom to create functional holistic systems to improve one's personal and communal circumstances is a human right. And he is honored to dedicate his entrepreneurial experience and gifts for innovation and systems of architecture toward empowering others to make good use of that right. Until then, stay sound and safe. Remember, this is our time.